that there's a lot of words in Hebrew that we use that might not be so familiar to you. Basically, it's a timeline of Jewish history. It starts off that way, 7 periods of history. You can see the minus 1500 to minus 1000, period 2, minus 1000 to 500, approximate, Boker Tov, approximate years, with year 0, of course, being what we call the year 0, but the common era, first 500 years, being primarily the Roman Empire. Of course, this is a very rough sketch of history. The Christians, the Muslims, really the Muslims took over the land of Israel, at least before Christians did, and then afterwards again. That's less important to me, the division. In terms of the Jewish events, we speak of the first temple and the second temple. Do you see where I'm reading in the first temple and the second temple, and the second and the third periods? First temple is associated with kingdoms of Israel and Judea, and then finally the exile to Babylon. And then they'll come back and build the second temple, and we have that at the end of that period, the Hasmonean dynasty, till finally the destruction of the second temple, in year 70, the beginning of section 4. You know what I'm talking about? So far, you with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second temple.
Yeah.
Machon Meir.
Right, exactly. So now, what's interesting is that Jewish leadership throughout these different periods have names that we use in Hebrew so often, that if you don't understand who they are or what these names are, it's hard. We're not talking the same language. In the first period, of course, a little bit of prehistory, before the first temple period even. We have the Avot, the Shvatim, Moshe and Yoshua, just to fill in the sequence according to our tradition, and then the judges, a group of judges who are, of course, described in the book of Judges. Then we have kings and prophets, Menachem and Nevi'im. What's a melech? A king. What's a navi? Prophet. Exactly. You see where I'm reading in the third row, where there's bolded words. Of course, the Kohanim were leaders, part of the leadership in the Second Temple period. The scribes, the Sofrim, men of the Great Assembly, and Knesset HaGdolah, we mentioned them a number of times, and finally the pairs towards the end of that era. And the most important period which we study, where we have their texts, the works, that we're going to talk about in just a minute, is Chazal. Chazal stands for Chachamim, Zichronam Livracha. Yes, sir.
Chazal, who is a member of?
Who's a member? Good. So pretty much, as you can see from the chart, it's the sages from the period of year 0 through year 500. Whoever lived in that time period. It's a very easy definition. They have nicknames. That period is so important, it gets divided into 2. Tanaim, first 200 years. Amoraim, the next 300 years. But Chazal are the sages of the Talmud, essentially, which we're going to see that's their major work. There's a few other works as well. But those rabbis who lived during that formative period of Judaism are called Chazal, called our sages. Not before and not after.
No.
Only that period. You see it on the chart?
Yeah, I see.
Smack in the middle. Chazal. Chachamim, the sages of blessed memory. Very special, very important. They passed on the tradition to, as you can see from the bottom of the page, really. It's the beginning of the period where we have the recording of the oral Torah. The oral Torah, of course, was oral and not recorded, but this is when it begins to become recorded in writing, in texts which we can study until today. And we have access to. They're in Hebrew, so we understand them. Some of them are in Aramaic, but pretty much the oral Torah becomes written at the period of Chazal. turn of the century. Okay, the the turn of the millennium, really, but the first century, CE. Well, good morning. Good morning. Pass this down, please. And this one too. Just doing a review, of course. I restructured it a little bit, changed a few things just to keep you on your toes. We're describing the timeline of Jewish history, and we're noticing that there's special words in Hebrew that we use for the leadership in each era of Jewish history. So in the era of just after, towards the end of the destruction of the Second Temple, and for the first 500 years of the century, of the millennium, we call them Chazal. Chachamim Zichronam Livracha. Afterwards, each 500 years, we get a different definition of the rabbis of that era, Gaonim, Rishonim, Achronim. It's a little bit easier to remember. Questions so far? So far, so good? So far, so good. Now, what's interesting is that we have books that were written also. And some of the names of the authors, they get named by the quality or the type of work which they did. So obviously you have the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, and approximately 24 books that were written, that became canonized as part of the Tanakh, as the written Torah. And then when we get to the oral Torah, bottom, last line of your chart here, of course the period of Chazal, we have the Talmud, which was created, which consists of the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Mishnah is ordered in 6 orders, 63 Masechtot of Mishnah and Gemara. And also Midrash was quoting from the words of the Chachamim, the sages of blessed memory. That's the Talmudic and Midrashic works. And then afterwards, we have other books. And there's 2 categories of works post-Talmud. What are the 2 categories that you see? There's some written by poskim and some written by mefarshim. Who are poskim? Who are poskim? The opposite. Nope. Well, now what's interesting, I think I'm making it clearer now than I ever did before, is that we have poskim from the Gaonim, Rishonim, and the Achronim. And we have mefarshim that are, throughout all these 1,500 years of Jewish writings, we have mefarshim of Gaonim, mefarshim of Rishonim, mefarshim of Achronim. What changes, what gives them the moniker, the title of mefarshim or poskim is what type of literature they write. If they're writing halachic literature, they're called poskim. Psak halacha means to decide halacha. They write sifrei halacha or sifrei psak. Many times the words are used. The decision from the Talmud and from the oral Torah. What do we do practically? It's a whole field of scholarship and practical leadership, where we need our poskim to guide us how to apply the Torah in each and every generation. 1,500 years since we had the Talmud. The Talmud is full of the sages' discussions and the sages giving us over the oral Torah. But how do we apply that to each and every era? That we have the poskim. You're looking at one right now. Do people ask me halachic questions? Do I give halachic answers?
Yes.
I am a posek. But wait, I also sometimes wear a different hat. I read the Torah, I read the Talmud, I read the Midrashim, and I come up with novel interpretations. So I'm also a mefaresh. See it? Mefaresh, mefarshim, commentaries. We find throughout, since the Talmud, many people that they don't put on the hat of telling you what to do, but they explain.
What's the name of the...
Lefaresh is the commentary, to comment, to explain.
Not necessarily on halakha, right?
Precisely, not necessarily halakha. Exactly. If you're giving a psak halakha, then you're goal is to decide. When you're explaining, writing commentary, you comment, you explain both sides. You don't necessarily have to take a side. You don't have to give a decision.
You might comment on the song of songs, like.
That's right. There's no halachic ramification from the Song of Songs. Very few, anyways. There might be some. Yes, please.
What's the difference between Dayanim and Poskim?
Good question. Dayanim are specifically in the context of a rabbinical court, a court of law, which gives verdicts in particular cases which were brought in front of the court. But most of halacha is nowadays, at least, is decided in front of the rabbi. It's not in front of a rabbinical court. You ask a question. There's not necessarily a court usually decides between two parties which are fighting or they can't decide, so the court gives the verdict. So that's a dayan, as opposed to a posek halacha.
How about shoftim?
So in modern Hebrew, there's a secular law system that has a shofet, a judge. This is very in parallel to the halachic system where we have a dayan in the Beit Din versus Beit Mishpat. Nowadays we have, in modern state of Israel, we have two parallel systems. We have the secular legal courts and we have the religious courts. So in the secular courts, they're called Beit Mishpat, the house of laws, and we have a justice, like in the secular world, around the world. There's courts of justice, and there's a justice of the peace, and there's the judge. And in halacha, to distinguish that, nowadays we use Beit Din, which is a Jewish law, and we have a dayan, who is the judge of a religious court. So the Beit Din is the more Jewish term. Beit Mishpat is used primarily for the secular courts in modern days. Of course, Shoftim was also the biblical period. They were the leaders of the Jewish people. They were called Shoftim. Before they were kings, they were leaders called the judges. They were judging throughout everybody. They always, whenever you have a society, people need judges, right? But the leadership was called Shoftim. Don't get confused between the words, the biblical Shoftim, which were like the leaders of the Jewish people, after Yoshua, right? Ehud ben Gera and Shimshon and all those leaders you can read about in the book called Shoftim. Don't confuse that with the later day feature of Jewish tradition, which has Dayanim, and nowadays there's in the secular Israel, there's Shoftim, there's the secular judges. Understand? Okay? Good. Anything else? What else do we have here on the page? So what's interesting is that we have all these names of the leadership, Geonim, Rishonim, Achronim, but then we also have a subcategory, the bottom right-hand corner. Commentaries versus law codes. So we have Mefarshim and Perushim and Sifrei Halacha, Psak. Two types of literature. You can write law and you can write commentary. These are the two primary modes of Jewish literature ever since the Talmud. They happened concurrently throughout all three generations, all three periods. Geonim, Rishonim, and Achronim, we have law codes and commentaries from the Rishonim and from the Achronim and even from the Geonim. Is that clear? Now, what is all this? What else? This is all the Jewish tradition. The Jewish tradition, as you can see in the bottom line, is composed of Torah Shebichtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, which mean written Torah and the oral Torah, right? Torah Sheba'al Peh, mouth. Torah that's on your mouth, it's oral. Torah Shebichtav, that is in writing. Okay, now what does all this consist of? If you turn the page, I'm going to shut up a little bit and give you some work. First of all, before I give you the work, I want to point out the top line, the box, the top of your page. See the box at the top of the page? it says, this tradition includes transmitted tradition, Mesorah. Limsor is to transfer, transmit, and inspired innovation, which is Chidush. Throughout Jewish history, we have both elements of transmitted tradition, Mesorah, and Chidush, inspired, innovation. I say it's inspired because we believe that it is godly, divinely sanctioned and guided. Remember the parable I told you last week? I showed you from the Midrash about a king who gives his servant wheat and flax, a box of wheat and bundle of flax. What does he expect him to do? To develop it, to create new things with it, to create bread from the wheat and textiles from the flax, right? So that's the job of the rabbis. Which generation do we really find the oral Torah doing a lot of chidush? Chazal, exactly. The period of Chazal. That was the foundational period of the. Also, we have, for the first time, recorded in writing the Mesorah. We have transmitted tradition, but also there's lots and lots of chidush. It's always hard to differentiate between Mesorah and chidush. And of course, the two major categories are halacha, laws which are given, and agadah. Agadah, we have a number of words used for beliefs. It's basically anything that's not legal. Emunah, machshava, halacha, hashkafa, and Kabbalah, and ethics is musar. All these different words are for beliefs, different words used for saying the beliefs of Judaism. Kabbalah, of course, is the mystical parts of Judaism. And now, to make sure we're on the same page and we're speaking the same language, I'd like you to translate all 35 words to make sure. And next to each one, I want you to put two things. One is the translation on the line which I gave you on the page. Put the translation of the word, of the term, and also the period where you'll find these leaders or this type of literature. And I want to see who gets 100%. I want everybody to get 100%.
Should we translate like what it means?
Yes, translate and translation, and the answers are all on your page. You can look. You can turn it over. You can look. The answers are all there. And also I want you to write which period, and I'll give you a hint, or periods. It's all there. It's all there. It's all there. Which period or periods will you find this leadership or this type of literature?
Can we write like in period, like?
You can write 1 or 2 or 3. Exactly. Yeah.
To start now?
Yes, please start now. And whoever wants another one, so you don't have to turn the page. A pen. Here's a pen. Whoever wants another one, so they don't have to keep turning the page backwards and forwards. I have extra copies here. You take one? Okay. Anybody need a pen? Everybody's good? 35 words is a lot of words in Hebrew. Did you know that you know 35 words in Hebrew? Of course you do. One by one. You don't have to do them all at once. One by one. You have all the answers before you. Whoever wants another page, you can take. Sorry about the printing, it's so small. It came out unintended that way. I'll make another page. When you're finished, come up and show me, and we'll go over it afterwards. Whoever gets 100 can be the teacher.
skins called decisors, not deciders.
It's a fancy English word for decisors. People who decide halacha. Yeah.
For example, Tanaim is Tanaim.
There's no translation of Tanaim. Huh? You have to come up with your own translation.
What are you supposed to?
Like earlier stages.
No, don't use the word earlier.
Once they are,
I would say sages of that period of 0 to 200. Sorry? Avot. Avot means forefathers.
yeah.
It's on the page. You have
Yeah.
it. So write it there.
Oh,
Write it
cool.
in.
So
Write it
simple.
in, forefathers, the translation. And write period 1. Period 1, because you see it in column 1.
Yeah.
That's it. Simple instructions.
But Raf, so are some like think like for the period. Some as the period for certain terms.
Some don't have.
But some terms are like regular terms that was through the whole Jewish history. Like
So write it in. Write it in. Write it in if you think that's write whatever you think is the right answer.
How you can translate the Tanaim?
That's what we were just discussing with Aaron before. I would say sages from 0 to 200, or authors of the Mishnah. There's many different ways. It's not that's the only one that's not on the page. The translation. Tanaim and Amoraim. The translations. You can tell me what it is. Tell me what it is. If you don't have a direct translation, tell me what it is.
Amorim is mentioned here.
Yeah.
It's 2 to 500 is 200.
200 to 500. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, 200. Just trying to get it all in one line.
But the Torah, the time is difficult to say from 1, but it continues, right? Still now you can say.
In the context of this page, we're using it for the meaning as it says on the page.
Okay.
Torah has the meaning, everything is Torah. It's true. The entire tradition is called Torah. But in this context, it refers to the 5 books of Moses.
Forefathers and patriarchs, the same thing?
Yes.
How you can explain Mishnah? How you can translate?
You tell me. What is the Mishnah?
Or the 6 others and all.
Six.
Or the
A statement of the oral Torah. And, it's a book that's giving over the oral Torah in 6 orders, right? Good. Okay, Aaron, you have an extra job. If I see you're finished, your job is to, after I check your work, you're going to write me a Chinese translation of all 35 words. Okay? Okay? Yeah, I'm sure it is. But you didn't write down the periods. You're supposed to, yeah, the periods where you're going to find each one.
Also periods.
Good.
Also periods, the time.
Just 1 through 7, yeah. Just yeah, very easy. Yeah. Like, meaning period 1 through 7. You don't have to write more than period 1, period 3, period 7, whatever.
Well, not the years. Like
You don't have to do the years, yeah, don't have to do the years.
But if you have done that, it's also good.
It's okay. I'll understand what you did. But that's why we have the numbers, to make it easy. We have the columns numbered.
Yes.
That's the point. The columns are numbered because of that. It's much easier if you just put in the years, the number instead of the years. I can tell we still need to work because I see people flipping over the page to see the answers all the time. I want you to have it in your head. Next time I'm going to give you just a list with no chart.
Is the periods till when? Till where? Until number 15 or till
The whole thing.
the whole thing?
The whole thing. Yeah. You can write 1 through 7 if you think it's throughout. If they're on the chart, then they're connected to they can be discussed in terms of the various periods of Jewish history.
if a Talmud is called Talmud is student, right?
Correct.
So then Talmud is
Talmud is the noun.
yeah, kind of now.
It's studying.
Yeah.
It's studying, yeah. If you just write the translations down, all I am is a Hebrew teacher. But if you write down the periods, then I'm teaching you something about our tradition. It's like a search, word search. You have all the answers in front of you. Just to find them. Whoever's finished, please show me your work. Take a look. Here's your pen. Excellent. Excellent. There's two things I want to discuss with you. But otherwise, excellent. Okay, we'll do it together with everybody. If you may. I want you to write a translation into Dutch.
Touch? Okay.
Okay? It's hard? Not so hard. I did it from Hebrew to English. No Dutch. Shouldn't be hard. This is going to be translated into 70 languages. Who wants to show me their work? Okay. Here's your pencil again. Yeah.
Is a law codified same as a decisional law?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you could call them codifiers as well, but not all codifiers are poskim, and not all poskim write codes.
Mm.
Okay, this is for Gabrielle. Thank you. I see things. Pass this to Gabrielle, please. So. I want you to write down next to each one. Next to each one, write which period they come from. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. Okay? Awesome. Awesome. Okay, Stephen. You did it the hard way, huh? You wrote the years.
Yeah, I started.
That's okay. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's take it up together. There's a few things I want to clarify. I want to start, with your permission. Are you still finishing? Some of you are still working. Huh?
Chinese translations could take
Take a long
days.
time. Okay, well,
One
it's
needs
important.
to be very creative.
Yes, okay. Yeah, good. Good. You want that brain to be working. Okay, let's take a look. Let's look at it together. We'll discuss it first and then we'll... Okay, everybody, let's start from the beginning. Very easy. Start easy. Avot means forefathers. What period did they live in? Period 1. That's easy. The Shvatim? The tribes. What period? 1. Very easy. Starts off very easy. Shoftim. How do you translate Shoftim? The judges. What does it mean in context? It means
Religious leaders.
not so religious, political leaders, the leaders of the Jewish people in that time. Before they were kings, they were judges. They weren't quite. They also did some judging, of course. They were also religious, of course, but primarily that's the name for the leaders of the Jewish people in that time period. In period 1, after the Avot and the Shvatim and Moshe and Yoshua, there were a group of leaders called Shoftim. How long did the period last?
Until 1000.
Maybe
Approximately how long?
maybe 200 years.
200 to 400 years. There was a long period. If you go through the book of Shoftim, I actually have a chart here somewhere.
Oh, yeah, 400.
You get to close to 400. It's a little bit confusing. We won't get into the timing precisely. Menachem, of course, is the kings. And Nevi'im. Now number 6. The priests. But when is the time period? So this is not your fault. It's my fault. It was the way it's written in the chart is
But priests are 3. They're always.
it's only number 3. But priests, when were they appointed as priests, according to our tradition?
And Sinai.
Who was the first priest? Aaron, who was Moshe's brother. So it goes all the way back to the period 1, right?
Yeah.
So 1, 2, and 3 should be the correct answer for priests. Even though in the chart, I put it at number 3 in the period of the Second Temple, because then they were part of the leadership.
Now they are also priests or Kohanim.
Even till today. So it's 1 through 7, you should say.
Okay.
Priests are 1 through 7, exactly. From time immemorial, from the beginning of the Jewish people, they were always priests. Exactly. I just put it in number 3 because they had a very central role in the leadership in the Second Temple period. Even more central than they had earlier. Because there were no more kings or prophets. So the leadership pretty much was the rabbis, the men of the Great Assembly, and the priests. But priests really is 1 through 7, so there's a trick question there. I got you all. Nobody got that right.
Why?
Even me.
So, you mean for the whole period?
Priest is 1 through 7.
Yeah, that's why I asked
You.
I was asking like.
Oh, that's right. Okay, let's keep going. Very good. Sofrim. Scribes. Of course, there was always scribes, but there was a group of people who paid attention to every letter of the Torah, of transmitting the text, and that's primarily in that 3rd period. Good. Number 8. Anshe Knesset Gedolah, men of the Great Assembly. We know when they lived. Very good. The Zugot, the pairs. Period number 3. Very good. Now we get to Chazal, sages of blessed memory. Tanaim. How do you translate Tanaim?
Sages.
Repeaters.
Good. Good. The best repeaters, people who repeat, because the word Mishnah also comes from to repeat. Meshanen. Lishaner is to repeat. And basically the Mishnah was an oral text. Like all texts were oral at some point in history. But in that point in history, particularly, it was the oral Torah. You were not allowed to write it down. And so the way to preserve the text was to repeat it. And so, but more importantly, so you're not wrong, Michael. It's a very good answer. However, I think the best answer that I would like to see is that the Tanaim are the
Sages 0 to 300.
the sages, the authors of the Mishnah. And only the Mishnah. That's why they get their name Tanaim, because Tanaim is like Shana, the Taf and the Shin switch from Aramaic to Hebrew. Shanaim, they're people who repeat the Mishnah. So it's true they repeated it, but also they were the scholars, the sages who were developing these laws, transmitting them and developing them. Let me skip for a moment to number 30 and 31. The words most of you got. Masorah means transmitted tradition. It's at the top of your page. The first box right over here says. Okay. And Chidush is inspired innovation. But you fell for the trick, or you didn't recognize or appreciate that one could say that these are the building blocks of the entire Jewish tradition from period 1 through period 7. For sure, periods 4 through 7, the oral Torah. For sure in the oral Torah, right? We have a mixture of traditions that were transmitted and innovations by the sages. But the truth is, there were innovations even by Moshe. Torah, that our tradition tells us that Moshe had innovations himself, although primarily he was transmitting to us the word of God. So really, Masorah and Chidush are features of the entire Jewish tradition. Pinchas, you understand what I'm saying now? About number 30 and 31?
No.
Okay. So, you speak Mandarin, right?
The Mishnah written in the period.
0 to 200.
So,
Period 4. 0 to 200. The first part of period 4.
The
Mishnah was written down. Yes. But now I'm talking about number 30 and 31. Aaron, can you please say in Chinese what I was explain to Pinchas what I was trying to explain, that these are features of the Jewish tradition throughout.
主要是第4个时期，但是从第1到第7个时期其实都有涉及。因为摩西领受妥拉也是这个
Transmitted tradition and inspired innovation.
也是受到上帝启示的创新。
Stephen, yeah, he said right? He said good? Yes. Good. Okay, very good. And now Cantonese. Israel, maybe Stephen, can you try in Cantonese?
呢個係
29 and 30 and 31. Yeah. 30 and 31. Mr. Chidush.
係神俾傳統係從呢個摩西到而家咯，即係俾一代傳一代嘅傳統。
The traditional teach every generation and generation.
Right, that's one element, just to transfer the tradition. But there's also another element of chidush, of innovation. 31. Chidush. New laws being created. That's 31. That's also part of the tradition. From 1 through 7.
個法律啊，新嘅法律啊，新嘅法律，每一隊有一個新嘅法律。
Okay? All right? Good? We got it? Everybody got it? How about Dutch? What do you say? You want to explain to Michael Arya what's going on? Number 30 and 31.
Dutch speakers are all Gentiles.
Dutch speakers. No, you got it. You understood what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
About Masorah and Chidush? There's periods 1 through 7?
Because they still say like this is his Masorah, this is his Masorah. But what I realized, like when they talk about some rabbis, they say yes, we follow this Masorah. So it's like
That's tradition, right?
Yeah,
But
like,
there's also an element of Jewish tradition where the rabbis innovate. That's what I was showing you yesterday. They make bread out of wheat berries, right? And someone's going to bake a bread which is sweet. That one's going to bake a bread which is sour. Or another one's going to bake a cake. There is room for innovation within the tradition.
What Hillel did.
That's right. Good example.
The years people that want to borrow.
Very good. The Prose Bowl. Very good. Good. Okay. Let's go back to where were we? We're up to number 10. Number 10. Some people would say that this idea of innovation, of Chidush, only starts at number 10. I explained to you, I really think it's 1 through 7. Whenever there's people, there's going to be innovation.
Is Hazal number 4?
Number 10 is Chazal number 4, correct. Chazal is number 4. Period 4. The period of Chazal. From 0 to 500, that we call them Chazal. Okay, number 11. So we said that the Tanaim, authors of the Mishnah, you want to be more precise? Mishnaic literature, because there's also other literature written by the Tanaim. What, for example? The Midrashei Halacha, the Midrash. Midrash was also written by Tanaim. At least the Midrashei Halacha were. There's another type of, now Midrash, what number is that, Midrash?
Number 22.
Number 22.
Yes. But
Most of you got that wrong.
The period.
Most of you got what it is wrong. Someone said stories. So Midrash Halacha and Agadah is two types of Midrash. But what is Midrash?
Interpretation
It tells us, good, it tells us about Halacha and Agadah.
the Tanakh.
Well, since this is the period of the beginning of the oral tradition, right? Oral tradition being written down. So you could call it's the oral tradition being written down. How is that different than the Mishnah?
Because in the Midrash, it's only related to the Bible.
Good.
And the Mishnah.
Good. The Mishnah is oral traditions organized in 6 orders, in 6 books. And the Midrash is oral traditions organized by the Tanakh. Organized by the Bible. It's also Tanaim and Amoraim, Midrash. It's also oral teachings. So it's just like the Mishnah.
Can you also say like Midrash is like oral Torah stories?
Midrash is oral Torah and Mishnah is oral Torah. It's not all stories. It's not all stories. Midrash, there's Midrash Halacha, which is not stories.
Kabbalah is also Midrash.
Yes.
Well, there's some. It can be rooted in some midrashim have.
Midrash is Drash from Drash, Kabbalah Sod.
Kabbalah. There is different levels. But the main point is to understand is that when the oral tradition starts to get written down, gets written down in two collections. You have to go. Okay. In 10 minutes. For 10 minutes. Okay. No problem. Be well. So the oral tradition gets written down in 2 major ways.
So oral tradition and biblical ways. What's nice to provide?
The oral tradition written down like a commentary. I would say organized by the Tanakh. Oral tradition organized by the Tanakh. And the Mishnah is oral tradition organized by 6 orders. Mishnah is not by the Torah. That's the innovation. 6 categories. The Mishnah is an oral Torah written down in 6 topics, whereas the Midrash is oral Torah written down, organized by the Torah and the Bible, the Tanakh. Okay, they're both oral Torah being written down, both works of the sages. And it's not only stories. Some of it is legal, and some of it's non-legal. Some's halacha, some's agadah. Both in the Mishnah and in the Midrash.
It's like, before I understand like this, it's like a story to understand something from a story.
So that's a mistake, because it's not only stories. Agadic Midrash are many stories, but halachic Midrash is not stories at all. Halachic Midrash looks word for word like a Mishnah. It's laws. But where you're going to find the laws of Shabbat. So in the Mishnah, there's a topic called the laws of Shabbat. And in the Midrash, it's going to be on the Psukim, which speak about Shabbat. You'll have an oral tradition written down there by that Pasuk. You understand? The organizing structure is what changes, not so much the content. We have both halacha and agadah in both.
So c'est vrai, there's a Sifrei Deuteronomy, right?
What do you mean? Sifrei, yeah.
Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of halakha.
Absolutely. So I think I should take out the words halacha and agadah here, because it really applies to both the Mishnah and Gemara and the Midrash. It's a feature of the entire tradition, 1 through 7. Right? Halacha and agadah, that's what you had in the little box on top of the glossary. Right? Consists of, we said Mesorah and Chidush, and halacha and agadah. So these are not really connected only to the words Midrash. We have to change that, because it's misleading.
So from 1 to 7.
1 through 7. Halacha and agadah, this is part of the Jewish tradition, can be divided up into areas that are legal and areas that are ethics, beliefs. You understand what I'm saying now? It's a work in progress, right? Most people don't know Midrash as most of them know the Midrash as the stories of Midrash Agadah, of those Agadic parts of the Midrash. Okay, let's go back to our list. What are we up to? Amoraim. Who are the Amoraim? If we said Tanaim is the authors of Mishnaic works, Amoraim are the authors of Gemara. Exactly, the authors of the Gemara. That's the best translation. So number 11, Tanaim is the authors of the Mishnah, and there's other Mishnah books, like we said, Midrash, Mishnaic books. And Amoraim are authors of the Gemara and other works from that period. But to keep it simple, you could say authors of the Mishnah, authors of the Gemara. Tanaim are authors of the Mishnah, Amoraim, authors of the Gemara. Simple.
And how you call them from the Midrash, those people write it?
Tanaim and Amoraim.
Both said it.
The Midrash consists of words of both. That's right. Very good. Some Midrashim are even later, but the classic Midrash is it usually is quoting Chazal, quoting Tanaim and Amoraim. Okay? The Midrashei Halacha are earlier. They're primarily Tanaim. The Midrashei Halacha. It's a group of Midrashim that are by the Tanaim. Some people call them Midrash Eretz Yisrael. It's That's where the Tanaim lived, only in the land of Israel. And the other books of Midrashim also include words of Tanaim, but also includes words of Amoraim, which shows us that they were collected a little bit later. So Midrashei Agadah are a little bit later than Midrashei Halacha, but it's a little details, too much details. Yeah.
But how you say the people write the Talmud? Just both, right? Because it's Mishnah and Gemara do that.
Correct. That's right. Tanaim and Amoraim.
But you have like Talmud Bavli.
That's right. Talmudists. You could call it.
Those people, the Tanaim were only in Israel, right?
That's right.
Just,
Amoraim we had both in Israel and in Babylon.
okay.
That's why we have a Talmud Bavli and a Jerusalem or Palestinian.
But are they the same Amoraim? Because the one
Some moved, some transferred.
or they moved like from
They traveled. They traveled
because of destruction and the Roman situation.
for many reasons.
But it's smaller than Yerushalayim. The Talmud Yerushalayim is one book.
The Yerushalmi is based on the 6 orders of the Mishnah. It's the same books. It's the same structure. 63 Masechtot, 6 orders. Not on all of the 63 books of the Mishnah do we have Talmud. Some we have no Talmud. Some we have only Bavli. Sometimes we have only Yerushalmi. Sometimes we have both.
How many years it take to finish the Yerushalayim? Because the Bavli is
It was never finished.
I mean, like
It was
they
never finished.
finished to read it.
Oh, to read it.
The Talmud is 7 years.
If you do 1 page a day, there's such a system. But if you read 7 pages a day, you could finish it in 1 year.
The page number is the same.
Right? Sure you can.
The two Talmuds have the same page numbers?
Nope. Nope.
No.
Nope. They follow the same chapters and Mishnayot, but the pagination is different. There's no standard pagination of the Palestinian Jerusalem Talmud until today. There's no standard. The Babylonian, one of the reasons it became so successful in that we were able to get everybody to study it is because the pagination became standardized about 500 years ago. The first printing of the Talmud became the way to print the Talmud, and we can refer to the page number. Beforehand, you had to say, that's at the end of that chapter. You had to go flipping pages to search for it. So the pagination helped very much the study of the Talmud.
How you need to read the whole Talmud?
No.
No?
No, there are more important sections of this. You're tested on certain sections, on not the whole thing. The assumption is that you're going to be studying your whole life, and eventually you'll finish the whole thing. But yeah,
You finished the whole Gemara already?
no. I've always been busy doing other. There's so much more to learn and to teach that I never actually went page by page by page by page to finish the whole thing. Many sections I have finished, page by page, but not all of it. Not all of it. Not yet. Not yet. One day. One day. When I have more time. But there's no excuses. Okay, so we know what the Tanaim and Amoraim are, and their periods are very, very defined. Right? Tanaim and Amoraim are only period 4. Okay? Different parts of period 4. You could say 4a and 4b. 2 sections, right? 4a and 4b. Maybe we should divide it that way, but Tanaim is 4a, 0 to 200, and Amoraim is 4b. Geonim, Rishonim, Achronim, very easy. Torah, Nevi'im, Ktuvim. Good. I'm glad you noticed what I did this time, that number 17 and 18. 17 and 18.
Yes. Because 17 is already.
I didn't make a clear divide between period 2 and period 3. Did you notice that? Because the Ktuvim include Megillat Ruth, for example. Megillat Ruth goes all the way back to period 1. According to some people say it was in the time of the Shoftim. The Hebrew Meshvot HaShoftim is the beginning of Megillat Ruth. It was the time of the judges. So it goes back to period 1. So Nevi'im and Ketuvim really cover. And Job. When did Job live? Eov.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
So there's different opinions. Some people say he never existed. It's just a legend. But some people say he was in the time of Moshe. So that goes already back to period 1. So for the correct answer for 17 and 18 is periods 1, 2, Tehillim, for example. Tehillim is part of Ketuvim. Who wrote the book of Ketuvim? It's attributed to King David. King David, which period was he in? Period 2, right? The king. He was the first king.
And some Tehillim are from Moshe Rabbeinu himself.
Some Tehillim are attributed to Moshe and even to Adam Arishon.
Yes.
Yes.
Shabbat.
So I would say that the Torah Nevi'im Ketuvim would be, or Nevi'im Ketuvim should be 1 through 3. Understand? Aaron, you with us?
Yes.
You got what I said about the Nevi'im Ketuvim? You were not with us. You missed it.
I got stuck in the translation of Ketuvim because it's very.
Hagiographa, writings, there's so many different ways of translating it. But more importantly, Stephen, tell him in Chinese what I said about the periods of 17 and 18.
2, 3. In Chinese.
Chinese?
信经，他是说这个时期这个 Nevi'im 因为那个 Megillah Esther 是可能是在第一时期也是有
I think I said Megillat Ruth, not Esther. Esther is from Persian times. That's for sure number 3. But
是在也是在第一时期，所以它是1、2、3，在 Ketuvim 也是因为这个 Book of Job 也是因为可能是在第一时期的，所以它是包括1、2、3。
Time of Moses.
what about the Tehillim? Even though it's part of Ketuvim, it's not necessarily from the 3rd period. It's also from the 2nd period. So there are sections of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim that from all 3, 1, 2, and 3 is the best answer for Nevi'im and Ketuvim. 17 and 18, 1, 2, and 3.
But Nevi'im is 2 and 3, not 1 and 1. Nevi'im.
Correct. That's right. It starts from Yoshua is in period 1.
Oh, okay.
Right, Yeshua's period 1. Yoshua and Shoftim is period 1.
That is 1, 2, and 3.
So it's 1, 2, and 3. Nevi'im is also 1, 2, and 3. And Ketuvim is 1, 2, and 3. All 3. Right. Okay, good. Yeah.
For the Shoftim, in the period of Moshe, when the leaders are appointed to be a judge, are they called Shoftim also? No.
They're called Zakinim, also Shoftim. They're also called Shoftim. It's another meaning of the term. But in this context, we mean the leaders from that period of history. It's true, there's also Shoftim in the time of Moshe. Good point. But that's more in the judicial function, like Aaron was saying. Shoftim as judges in a court of law. The Shoftim we're referring to here is referring to the leaders, the political leaders. Good, very good. Shoftim is a confusing word.
But you can say that the Shoftim in the time of the period from Yoshua till Shmuel, you can say like they were people who stepped up, like when there was no official
leadership.
And they were the only ones with official
Leadership. Very good. That's right. Number 19, 20, and 21. We've been talking about now already. The Talmud, the best translation would be the oral tradition. Oral Torah, written down. Talmud.
I was studying.
That's a nice translation. It's a nice translation, but it's the name of a book. It's a book which collects the oral traditions. It is composed of the Mishnah, which is oral traditions organized in 6 topics, and the Gemara, which is an elaboration on the Mishnah. Translate elaboration, Aaron? It's not just translation. It's not just explanation. It's elaborating, developing more. It's,
Like, tradition sounds like you can choose. You have to do or you don't have to do. This you have to do, right?
there's all parts. It includes halacha and agadah.
Yes, but if you say
The halacha parts have to be done. The agadah parts are about our beliefs.
Like further explanation.
Yes,
Further explanation. What did you use in Chinese?
进一步阐释，or 阐释，
Chanshu? Chanshu. The Gemara is Chanshu of the Mishnah. Is that correct?
解释 is like explanation, and 阐释 is maybe deeper, further explanation.
Further
它是应该
explanation.
是对尝试的尝试。
So would I say correctly that the Gemara is a Chanshu of the Mishnah? Chanshu? Chanshu. Elaboration. In Dutch, what's elaboration? Yeah. Gabriel, Spanish. Elaboration. Yeah, very easy.
Lucky guys.
Whoa, okay.
And in Chinese? Shangsu.
We have a new word for everything, trust me.
Okay. Now, Midrash, we talked about it, right, before.
We don't have computers or nothing. It's the radio, television like that.
In China.
Everything is a new word.
Okay. Who can tell me what number 23 is?
Response.
Which means?
Exchange letters.
Right. Letters, it's primarily halachic questions and answers. And what periods do you have for that?
5,
4,
6, 7.
5, 6, and 7, correct. If you really want to expand it, what happens when the Jews in the desert find somebody cutting wood or collecting wood on Shabbat?
They question.
They bring him to Moshe, and Moshe says, I don't know, let me ask Hashem. He comes back, Hashem tells him, put him to death, right? Is that not question and answer? Is that not responsa?
You have to write it down.
Ah, right. Usually we're talking about a book. Right. So it's written. So is it not written down? In the Torah? It's written down. So you could say questions that as responsa is a feature of the Jewish tradition 1 through 7. Do we not have questions that are addressed to the prophets and that they're recorded, their answers are recorded, written down in the books of the prophets? So Sheilot Teshuvot, it's primarily, of course, based on the Talmud. The halacha based on the Talmud, so that's 5, 6, and 7. But actually, really, it's 1 through 7. Do you understand?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah.
But this is also a responsa, right?
No, this is not a responsa. Responsa has question, answer. Do you have this? How is this book structured? Chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. There's no questions and answers. This would be closer to a code, a law code, a book of halacha, of Sefer Psak, or Sifrei Halacha. That's number 24. The kosher book, exactly, that Binyamin brought in, that's a book of questions and answers. That's good, good.
And what the Rambam had with the Temani, was that the response?
Yeah, the Rambam had responsa, and he wrote a code, and he wrote commentary.
And it's all for the responses. The response on that question.
There are 3 different books, 3 different collections. There's a collection of questions and answers. Then there's a book, which was, a code of law, which he wrote to tell you for all situations. And there's also commentaries. He wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. The Rambam wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. Just like Rashi.
Which book is that? Another Mishnah Torah?
No, it's a different book. It's called the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah. Yeah, just like Rashi wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. And Bartanura wrote many, throughout the ages, people are writing commentaries on the Mishnah. That's why When you look at number 27 or 26, Perushim. Perushim are written, of course, ever since the Talmud. It's been commentaries written about the Talmud. So we have 5, 6, and 7. But actually, in some ways, you can say that the Nevi'im is a commentary on the Torah. It's not written that way. Books written as a commentary on the previous book, primarily is 5, 6, and 7. Right? We have commentaries on that throughout 5, 6, and 7. What else do we have here?
So Rabbi is a commentary on the previous book.
Correct. Perushim are commentaries on previous books. That's right. And what's the difference? 27 Mefarshim and Parshanim. I didn't make this clear.
They are commentators.
Commentators, correct. But why the two words? So it's
I think Parshanim come from Parasha.
it's a good way to remember it.
Yes, but maybe because some people they like the Rashi, he explained by
Topic material. Parshanim we usually use for commentaries on the Tanakh. Mefarshim we use it for commentaries on the oral law, on everything else. Parshanim.
Parshanim is not on Torah.
It is on Torah. Parshanim is on Torah and Nevi'im and Ktuvim, Tanakh. Mefarshim is for later works. It's just like a
commentary on Torah and Haftarah.
Haftarah would also be Parshanim because Haftarah comes from the Nevi'im and yeah.
But like the book from the Rambam, that's Mefarshim, the commentary on the Mishnah.
That's Mefaresh. That's
Mefaresh.
right. That's right. That's right. It's a
Also-
perush. It's a perush. He is a Mefaresh. He's writing a perush. Right. A Mefaresh writes a perush. Parshanim also write a perush. There's no other word for,
But the Mefarshim only writes on the oral Torah.
Yeah, Parshanim is usually used for the written Torah.
Parshanim for, and Mefarshim for the oral Torah.
That's right. But there is similar words, very similar words. The commentators, the same translation for both. Torah shebichtav, we spoke about Torah shebal peh, we spoke about it. Now here, this is so important. I can't believe someone fell for this. Number 28 and 29. What are the periods?
1, 2, 3 is the first one.
Precisely what I'd like to root out from your thinking. The oral Torah did not start in period number 4. It only started to get written down in period number 4. We believe that oral Torah was given to Moshe at Sinai, together with the book. He also got oral explanations. I would say 1, 2, and 3. There was oral Torah throughout the period. Of course, it got developed, it got expanded in period 4. But don't think that the oral Torah started only in period 4. The book never was written down before period 4. But there was oral Torah in period 1, 2, and 3. Right? We have a tradition. Some laws, we say, are called halacha leMoshe miSinai. It's a tradition transmitted to Moshe at Sinai. Even though the law appears written down for the first time in the Talmud. Right? Or in the Mishnah. It's very important.
But how do people remember all these stories? Like, how do you remember this?
So in the ancient world, people memorized lots of things. Nah, I don't know if they're smarter, but it's just a different way of thinking. Their minds were trained. There were people, you've heard of Homer?
Yes,
Homer, the author of the Greek classics. I have the books at home. The Iliad, the Odyssey. Hundreds of pages. It was all memorized. It was all written down. It was not written down until later.
The
People
Indian
knew them off by heart.
The Indian priests are saying like 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, they memorized thousands of pages.
Thousands of pages memorized. Yeah, the oral Torah used to be oral until it got written down. So don't think that that's the beginning of the oral tradition in section 4, in period 4. Is that clear?
The crazy thing is all the people memorize the same thing.
Listen, there were a few. That's why we needed the discussions in the Gemara. Sometimes there were a little bit different traditions, and they had to discuss. What was written down in the Mishnah is one version, but I have another version. And then discuss which one is the more correct, and how do we... Then it becomes a question of which one do we use practically. That's a question for the poskim, to decide the halacha according to which version. But the Talmud is full of various versions, various traditions. Some of them were written in the Mishnah, some were written outside, were not written down in the Mishnah. They were collected in other places, like the Midrash, right? Some of the oral traditions were written down in the Midrash, not in the Mishnah. Oral traditions about what? About both halacha and agadah. Okay, our tradition includes both halacha and agadah. Throughout, 1 through 7. Okay? Oh, Michal, you wanted to say something?
Yes, because I was like, one time I spoke with a friend, Michal from the yeshiva. I said like, hey, how was the oral tradition that Moshe received? Did Moshe, Hashem also said to him, Rabbi Yehuda Omer?
That's a good question.
But now when I think about the name Tana, repeaters, then they was repeating the subject that's already been around for many years probably.
Yeah, so it's a combination. As I taught you, there's Mesorah and Chidush. Number 30 and 31. Throughout our Jewish tradition, some things were Mesorah, transmitted. And there's also, Rabbi Yehuda could have been giving you a tradition transmitted that he heard from his rabbi, all the way back to Moshe. But he could have also been making a chidush, an innovation, based on his understanding of the tradition. He wants to take it one step further and give a law which maybe he innovated that law. That's allowed.
And the chidush, Moshe never heard of it. Maybe.
Moshe never heard of it. You know, there's a famous midrash about Moshe was put into a time machine, and he went to the class of Rabbi Akiva, and he didn't understand it, and he was so upset. Until he heard Rabbi Akiva, one of the students raises his hand and asked, "Where does this all come from?" And Rabbi Akiva says, "Halacha leMoshe miSinai." And Moshe felt better. So if it's from Moshe, how could he not understand it?
That's why it's a revelation. It's a prophecy. For example, Rabbi Adi.
No, but how could it be attributed to Moshe?
For example,
If Moshe doesn't even know it.
Oh, the thinkings about this?
Because
doesn't know.
Let me tell you a story. They say that there was a person, a scientist called Euclid. Euclid. He made geometry. Euclidean geometry. Geometry in Chinese is what? Like angles and... So they put him in a time machine. And they took him to Jerusalem here, to the String Bridge. The String Bridge at the entrance of Jerusalem. And he was saying, wow, how could you lift up a road with a train on top of a bridge? How can it hold it up? This is a miracle. And they said, no. You know what it's based on? It's based on you, Mr. Euclid. It's based on your geometry. All the principles that you laid in geometry, that's what we use today. The engineers built up on it and developed it and understood it better and better and better. They could build the bridge, the String Bridge. Euclid was amazed. It's like the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? It's halacha leMoshe miSinai. It's all based on the DNA given to Moshe.
Yeah, but Rav Alyeh Kaplan mentioned something like he used to write physics papers, scientific papers. So like with divine inspiration, he could finish a paper in a few days. But after that, after some months or some years, when he read his papers again, he could not understand what he wrote.
That's amazing, right? We do believe that there was inspired innovation, that Hashem guides the sages and invests them with special powers to interpret the tradition. And so there's inspiration there. They had divine wisdom too. It wasn't just for themselves. Rabbi Yehuda making stuff up because he was so smart, right? There was guidance by God. When you study the Talmud, it's clear that there's divine inspiration. Yes.
But can you say, like in the first in Devarim, when they say, the shoftim of thing, they say you have to listen. Is that also like the idea for innovation? Like, because that's talking about when you don't understand something.
Correct. Yes, it gives authority to the rabbis in each generation, for sure.
But I also heard, I don't know if it's true, but I read in the Kuzari that there was also a certain time to do that, like only when the Bet Mikdash existed, that they only could make
listen, if you it's true that if you notice that the prophecy sort of ended, period 2, beginning of period 3, prophecy ended. And so in some ways that this rabbinic tradition is replacing prophecy, or it's a continuation of prophecy. And that obviously, we have a tradition that the sages sat in the temple before it was destroyed, the beginning of the 4th period, right? Beginning of the period of the sages. They were teaching and deciding halacha from the Beit HaMikdash. And so perhaps they were influenced by this divine help, this divine wisdom.
Yes.
And the tradition says that the sages, it's almost like another channel. When the channel of prophecy stopped, there's no more prophecy, the sages received. That became the primary vehicle of Hashem's word to us through the insights of the sages.
But that also had like an end, like on this moment nobody can come.
Yes, very good point. After the Talmud was sealed, period 4 is over. There's no more Talmud. After that we have commentaries. We have poskim. We have to apply the halakha, but we're not on the same level as the sages. The sages, that level, that period of history is gone.
But how they reach this level?
How they reach the level? Well, obviously they had to work on their personal midot. But as we were saying, I believe that they got divine help. It wasn't in the form of prophecy, but it was in the form of divine guidance, guiding their studies and their innovations, as well as their passing on the tradition. Mesorah and Chidush. Period of Chazal is, with the closing of the Talmud, everybody else is on a different level. We have no more sages. I'm very sage. We don't have any Gaonim either. Wait, I'm a genius. No, there's geniuses. So this is a period which was the foundational period. We consider all the words of the Tanaim and Amorim like DNA, like building blocks that we have to work with. Continue to work with it another 1,500 years till today and more. Gaonim, Rishonim, and Achorim. But it was accepted. All the Jewish people accepted. We don't have the right to argue with the sages of the Talmud. We're not on the same level as they were. Okay, yeah, you want to say something, please?
This is a little bit weird, but
Okay.
why this genius or God's communications?
Why did it stop, huh? Why did prophecy stop, and why did the period of the sages end? And why do we have this layered authority, this authority at various different levels? Right, like we touched it at the Gaonim, and the period of the Rishonim also. It's not generally that an Acharon argues against the Rishon, and a Rishon can't really argue against the Gaon, and a Gaon can't really argue against the Chazal. There is this closed periods that our tradition developed that way. You're asking why? It's a good question.
Is responsa one part of the returning to this stage? Because many you can write to another Rav and ask him questions, and
even when you're writing responsa, even when you're answering and applying, you're applying halacha to the new generation. You're not going to violate this division between the period of Chazal. None of the Gaonim or Rishonim have the ability to argue against Chazal and say, Rabbi Yehuda, he was wrong. He interprets the Torah wrong. You can't say that.
they don't say it.
They don't. They never do. They never do. Our tradition understands that the period of Chazal was gold, like DNA, like I said. We continue to develop afterwards. There is chidush. There are innovations, but not ignoring the basis of the period of the Talmud. The Talmud is the basis of our Jewish tradition. Yeah.
Does it have to do with like the temples? Like when the prophets and the writers were the two temples were like not destroyed, and then in the destruction there was the Talmud after that.
Yeah. It could be connected for sure. It could be connected. In general, we sort of look at history a little bit backwards, in that the farther and farther we are away from Sinai, the lower and lower level of authority we have. So the Torah, of course, is the closest. Nevi'im next. Ketuvim next.
The Shoftim period is quite low. No? There are some people with high level.
There were the Shoftim themselves, and there were prophets at that time too. There were prophets during the time of the Shoftim. That's also imprecise. That the prophets is only, period 2. It's also period 1. There were prophets. What's clear? There was also some prophets at the beginning of period 3. Right at the beginning of the second temple, we had prophets. Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi lived in the period of in the third period. So it's not precise that the Nevi'im are only in number 2. For Nevi'im, we talked about already. Nevi'im and Ketuvim should be 1, 2, and 3. But the farther we get from Sinai, the farther we get away from prophecy, first temple period, second temple period, we have less authority. And the period of Chazal was the first period after the end of prophecy, where we find this restatement. The oral law gets recorded in writing for the first time in the Mishnah, in the Midrash, and the Gemara, and it becomes the gold standard for Jewish tradition. Yes?
Maybe like the oral Torah gets written down because in the first and second temple they used to practice it, so there was also no reason to write it down to daily practice.
Right.
And after they don't practice, so they have to write.
There was Roman persecution. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, famously, he was unique in that he had riches and he had wisdom, and he realized, if I don't start writing this stuff down, it's going to get lost. So we're very lucky that the oral traditions started to get written down in the period of the sages. Good. Did we finish the page? Did we finish? What are we up to? So halacha is legal material. Agadah is everything else other than other traditions. Other traditions, Agadah, it includes beliefs, which is the translation of emunah, machshava, or hashkafa, beliefs, and Kabbalah is mystical traditions, a unique part of, or type of beliefs. And Musar, of course, is ethics. Yes, Binyamin.
So what's the period?
It's about the position of Baba Sala
In
in the context of our studies.
He, Baba Sali lived about 100 years ago. So he's definitely Acharonim, right?
Yeah.
He's definitely from the last period, right?
Yeah.
He's the period of the Acharonim. Some people attributed to him some form of divine intuition. Some kind of intuition. He would be the first one to say, I'm not a prophet, but some people say he had some kind of prophetic vision. Throughout our generations, there's always been some people that seem to have some special connection, but not on the level of the prophets. But he was definitely a holy man and a great scholar. Great scholar. But he had some kind of, seems to have some kind of a secret channel of divine wisdom. Okay? Does that answer the question? Even today, some people say there are rabbis, some
Even
holy
Hetzel
people.
has some kind of,
Who? Sorry?
Even Theodor Hetzel has some kind of
Who?
prophetic vision. The founder of political Zionism.
Theodor Herzl. Well,
There's some kind of, even he's not religious.
yeah, well, he was maybe divinely inspired to start this movement, which we believe is part of the redemptive process. But usually we associate this kind of divine insider knowledge with somebody who keeps the mitzvot and has holiness to him.
Even Hashem could use...
That's right. Hashem could use any tool he wants. Right. We're all tools of Hashem. As sinners as we are, we're all tools of Hashem, right?
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Comments? I'm glad we did this review.
Musar is in period 7? Or?
So that's, let's talk about that. Both Halacha and Hashkafa and Agadah and Musar and Mesorah and Chidush. And Torah Shebichtav and Torah Shebe'al. Number 28 through 35. 1 through 7. We have elements of beliefs. We have elements of ethics. What is the book of Mishlei if not full of ethics? Right? What is the book of Pirkei Avot? It's part of the Mishnah. It's a book of ethics. Right? So we have ethics throughout every period. We have books of ethics written by the Rishonim. We have books of ethics written by the Geonim. We have books of ethics written, of course, by Acharonim.
There's a Musar movement.
Sirach. The book of Sirach.
But Sirah, yes. With that's right. That's not part of the Tanakh, but it's part of the tradition. Yes, right?
There's a Musar movement.
That's something special for the 19th century, right? It started, it's a sort of like a societal, cultural movement, which led by Rabbi Israel Salanter, lived in the 1800s, and it got the name, the Musar movement. But the concept of what is Musar, teaching you ethics, that's 1 through 7. Okay? Kabbalah too. We believe that the Kabbalah is part of the oral tradition. We said oral tradition is 1 through 7. Didn't start by Tzfat in the 16th century. The books became, the tradition became maybe revealed in later times. But traditionally we have Sefer Yetzirah, attributed to Abraham. I don't know if every word, but the traditions, or the oral traditions of Kabbalah, mystical traditions, go back to Sinai. So it's period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All those last words, those last 7 words on your page, pretty much 1 through 7. Not everything on this chart is based on periods, right? All these words I'm teaching you, this glossary of terms, they're not all only for a specific period. Some of the words are. Gaonim, only that period. Rishonim, only that period. Achronim, only that period. And of course, our forefathers. It's only in period 1. Only some, but some of these features of Jewish tradition are throughout the generations. I think that's our new title. The structure and features of the Jewish tradition, right? We did well today. We didn't learn any of the laws of Pesach, but we learned about the structure and the features of our Jewish tradition. To be continued, Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow.